Welcome back to the Reagan RedZone. I'm your host, Webb Milward. Joining me today from Reagan is our president and my partner, Brian Deitz. Brian, good morning.
Good morning.
Great to have you back. Brian, we have a very special guest today.
Indeed.
Someone who we've known for a long time, who I consider to be on the Mount Rushmore of the industry. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Joel Wood, the CEO of the Council of Insurance Agents and Brokers, the CIAB. Joel, man, good morning.
Morning. The Mount Rushmore of the property casualty industry. That's a new one for me. Webb, Brian, pleased to be with you.
I'm sure that was what
Very glad you're here.
Your high school yearbook is one of your lifelong goals, to just dominate the property casualty insurance space. But Joel, it's great to have you. For those of our listeners not familiar, the CIAB is a national trade organization based in Washington, D.C. Perhaps no organization has done more to advocate on behalf of the broker, on behalf of the important role the broker plays in our industry. The council does a phenomenal job representing all of us on Capitol Hill. But they also host an annual event, the Insurance Leadership Forum. It's held at the Broadmoor in Colorado Springs. I know many listening attend that meeting, but for those of you who don't, the meeting was 2 weeks ago out in Colorado. I think, Joel, over 1,400 attendees from the broker and the carrier side. And Brian and I had the privilege of attending, representing Reagan. And Joel, just another successful year. That platform continues to be incredibly valuable for all of us in the industry. But man, so many industry leaders and obviously conversations that touch on every major trend you could think of that we're all navigating right now. And so the focus of the Red Zone today, guys, is to talk about just kind of key takeaways from that meeting, which obviously will broaden into kind of what we think are the key trends shaping the market right now in our industry. So Joel, with that, I'll give you one nugget for me and then would like to throw it to you on your biggest takeaway from the event. For us, what we loved is the environment is just so conducive for a real casual, relational way to talk and do business. We have clients that are there that we meet with all the time in their boardrooms, over Zoom calls, getting updates on their growth strategies, their perpetuation plans. And then you sit down at the Broadmoor and they drop something on you never knew they were thinking about. And it's like, guys, we talked to you a week ago and you didn't even mention this. And it's such a wonderful environment to build relationships and deepen relationships, but also to have some really intentional conversations about what the next few years look like. So for us, a huge home run, and I know Brian echoes that as well. But with that, Joel, your team puts a ton of effort and work into this. What was your all's takeaway as you left the Broadmoor?
Well, it was a gratifying meeting, and if I can be on Mount Rushmore, the other conflated thing that I saw was one of the London-based insurance trades called this the Davos of the property casualty industry. So it was gratifying. Look, this is our 112th year of convening this meeting. Just a little history lesson on it, and that it started out as strictly a business meeting back in 1913 when a group of mostly East Coast-centric brokers got together with East Coast-centric carriers, and that's where they divided up the markets and fixed the prices, allocated territories, and it was the cartel. And it was quite the business meeting, and then it evolved over the decades into being a very social event. For 93 years, it was located at the Greenbrier. I know your own grandfather, Webb, attended our meetings in the 1960s. And we've never striven for this to be a full marketplace meeting with thousands of people or to be a transactional meeting. We just want to have the highest level brokerage and insurance carrier executives with a minimum. We don't do a trade show, very few vendors that participate in it. And it's gratifying insofar as the theme that I took away from it this year was a lot of buoyancy from both the brokerage community and the carrier community, tinged with anxiety about the future in a softening rate environment, with uncertainty on M&A. But it was the sensation that the marketplace is functioning well, but a lot of anxiety about all kinds of external factors. And knock on wood, here we are almost into November with no major hurricane this year. And my understanding is that I saw a list just yesterday of the top 20 carriers, and only one was running at over a 100% combined ratio on the year, and that was just at a 102. So insurers seem to be somewhat buoyant about this, and but again, the sensation that a great year like that might be followed by ensuing years that could be more difficult, and there is definitely a sensation that things only get trickier as we move forward in the environment we're in today. But very, very successful meeting, all the top leadership. We've got all 50 of the top BI list brokers, 80 of the top 100. We only have 150 member firms, but that's 93% of the commercial property casualty marketplace and an ever increasing portion of the benefits market as well.
Yeah, that's great. We're going to touch on 3 or 4 topics, but if I had to capture them in a theme, it might be, topics that are really reshaping the industry, as you sort of alluded to in your takeaway there. And I think the first one would be just the movement of talent both moving up in organizations and out to other organizations. And so first, I want to touch on talent moving up and just the leadership demographics of this meeting. This was my 18th year attending the meeting, and really felt a significant shift from the last generation of leadership to the next generation of leadership. Firms really prioritizing succession planning, which is a big positive, obviously, building really impressive leadership teams in their 40s, right? Late 30s even. I counted up the meetings Brian and I had. Of all of our meetings, only 2 of those meetings had leaders that you would consider kind of the baby boomer or, the last generation of leadership. Everyone else we sit across the table with, was in their 40s and obviously has a long runway. So pretty cool to see that shift, and interesting to think about what the meeting might look like in 2030, Joel, over the next 5 years. But throw that to both of you, Brian, get you in here. Just the leadership demographics and kind of the generational shift we're seeing happening.
Yeah, it was fun to see. We met with a lot of our clients out there and got to spend some time with sort of existing leadership teams that are beginning that transition, and that's a fun place to be. If you look at broker stats, it hasn't really shown up yet. The weighted average shareholder age and the Reagan Value Index, which is 35 firms we value every year, hasn't moved a ton, but it felt, being at CIAB, like it's about to. And we met with a ton of firms, as you said, Webb, that are bringing 40-year-olds to the table in these discussions and giving them great leadership opportunities and roles, and that is exciting for our industry for sure.
So you guys didn't have meetings with members of the silent generation like me?
There's a couple of those still walking around.
The rap on us all is pale, stale male. You guys not so stale as me, but it was notable, that shift in demographics, at least from just how the meeting felt. One of the pieces of evidence that we have on this is we're not going to be able to do this next year, but for decades, this meeting has fallen on a weekend and then gone into the work week. And based on the pressures of our ever younger executive management, we are moving the meeting off of the weekend because of the people have younger families and want to spend time with their kids. I also would note, we have a long ways to go on this, but we are definitely seeing a lot more C-suite women executives. I felt that very much at this particular meeting. So just even things that I've noticed, my most recent trip to Lloyd's, just seeing a much younger and more diverse crowd of young people that are keeping that floor at Lloyd's of London humming. And as recently as 10 years ago, I don't think anybody would have talked about diversity and gender and makeup of the Lloyd's runners. I'm feeling better that the industry is making some strides on that, but it's definitely evidence in what I'm seeing among the executives that are participating in this. That being said, 25% of all of our attendees have attended that meeting for 25 years or more. And so it really is, for so many people, this is not just going to a business meeting, but it is going to see your friends as well. And like you said, you may hear something from completely different visiting with the firm in their boardroom, then you might see, you just don't know what you don't know. And happenstance conversations and that sensation that the industry, much of it global, has come together in one place does make for a special environment that is unlike any other industry meeting.
Yeah. I think perhaps even more dramatic than some of the generational shifting is obviously the movement of talent across organizations right now. We've had 4 mega deals over the last 18 months in our industry. But beyond that, we've had Howden moving into the US market. Just a lot of conversation while we were there about the movement of talent. And we were talking about this the other day. If consolidation is sort of the thing that reshaped the industry over the last 10 years, and you could assume that technology and advancements in technology will reshape the industry in the next decade. Right now, this movement of talent is kind of having its moment. It really is reshaping a lot of the industry, not just producers, but leaders of firms, and just a lot of shifting there. So throw it to you guys, just kind of reactions to that. Brian, maybe anything on your mind there?
Yeah, I'm of two minds on this issue, and there is a lot of talent moving, and it's certainly it's not a new thing, but it does feel accelerated. And there's more activity in this area. But at the same time, my gut is that, Joel, for the majority of your members and Webb, for the majority of our clients, I think there may be a phenomenon where they see a firm like AP Gallagher, a big deal come together, and they overestimate the producer fallout from that, and that there may be more talent on the street than actually comes about, at least in the immediate vicinity of when these deals take place. Because these acquirers are getting good at producer retention packages and making sure folks are coming on board. I think for sure, look, there's no doubt that there is movement of talent and that these deals shake things up. But it's interesting, talking to clients this week, there may not be as much out there as you think there would be. So that's kind of the first thought that I have. And then the second thought I have, especially with the Howden entry, that took place on such a scale, the amount of talent movement to start Howden's strategy in the US. I think there's just an interesting question there. How does that work long term? And is that well, when we look back in 3 or 5 years, will that be a really successful strategy for Howden, or will that have not gone as well as perhaps they hoped?
I think back to 20 plus years ago, the one word that summed up our meetings for a couple of years was Spitzer. 5 years ago, the one word that summed up all of our meetings was sidecars. The one word that sums up this particular meeting was Howden. And, we're Switzerland on that. But I think there has been a change in how we talk about scarcity. There's always been a demand for specialized production talent. That is the number one consuming issue that you guys deal with in your consultancy. It's what drives Reagan, and it drives so much of what we try to do within this association is providing resources so that people can grow talent to attract and retain. But also, I'm hearing more and more, not just about the production talent, but also really quality account managers, consultants, and service people in higher at a more concerning rate. One of the major firms that we all know, I heard that their number is they're shedding 3,000 employees a year just based on duplication. And so there is a spill out. And it's not just a matter of, we always talk about the fountain of M&A activity that comes up and then firms that spill out from it. But there's also an incredible amount of talent that does just through redundancy that occurs as some of these mega mergers, whether it is McGriff, whether it's AP, whether it's now Risk Strategies. A lot of this is occurring and is creating a talent shift and a talent opportunity for many.
Yeah, that's a good perspective. That'll kind of move us in, I think, to the next topic I wanted to talk to you guys about, which is just consolidation overall. And Joel mentioned big themes from the last decade. I think obviously M&A in the last decade, hard to be at the Broadmoor and not have conversations and rumors and different things talked about surrounding, merger and acquisition activity. Brian, your thoughts attending the meeting and kind of questions we got, obviously, given our position in the industry. Just curious how that landed with you.
Yeah, it was an interesting time to be there. We heard from several attendees that there was almost a thirst for more M&A rumors than were actually being talked about at the meeting, and several comments about this being a pretty quiet meeting from an M&A rumor standpoint. And that may be because we just completed in the last 18 months 4 mergers averaging probably 10 billion in total enterprise value. And so the industry may be taking a collective deep breath here on some of that. And if you look at M&A totals for this year, through Q3, announced deals are down about 15%. And so things are a little quieter on the M&A front than they've typically been. I think some of that is that people aren't announcing deals with as much frequency as they used to announce deals, and there are acquirers that are large volume acquirers that used to press release deals that aren't. And so that contributes to the total for sure. But that doesn't mean there isn't capital activity taking place. I think over the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months, we'll see more capital raises, more minority private equity backed brokers. We may see an IPO or two, but then we'll get back to M&A. Gallagher's CFO in their Q2 earnings call said, look, over the next 18 months, we have $7 billion to spend on M&A. And so we may be in a little lull here, but I don't think I think it's temporary.
And the publics are driving in this. They've got the cheapest source of capital. And as long as, particularly as market conditions as they have softened, I can't predict anything that's going to happen, but I can see what's happened in the last couple of years, and organic growth becomes more difficult to achieve. And we had that run of 3 to 4 years of a very hard market. Then those valuations are going to stay up there as long as the stock market continues to roar. And I think it's going to set the standard for valuations further with private equity fueled firms and other independent firms. So I don't see any diminishment in the appetite there. What we are seeing also is a trend line of people looking internationally to expand their scope. Mm-hmm. Certainly Brown & Brown is a great example there of having purchased scores and scores of agencies across Ireland, the UK, Europe. Firms like Acrisure, others that are looking into the European space, and a lot more international activity on that.
Yeah, and I think, you mentioned lull, Brian, temporary lull. I think perhaps maybe a regrouping of sorts in terms of the buyer mix and the people that have been doing most of the buying the last couple of years. You've got, readiness assessments for going public. You've got integration challenges and all the oxygen in the room that soaks up. So could just be a little bit of a regrouping or a focus in other areas before getting back to the task at hand of acquiring more business.
Yeah, and that's sort of on the demand side of the equation. And on the supply side of the equation, I think a reality is that the most desirable agents and brokers from an acquisition standpoint are call it, $10 to $100 million revenue brokers. Those are the ones that get the most attention in the marketplace, and certainly north of that as well. And a lot of those have been acquired. And so there's a sense in the marketplace that, hey, we've got the large brokers on the top, 18 going on $20 billion brokers, and we've got this massive footprint of smaller brokers in a fragmented marketplace. But that middle of the insurance distribution landscape has gotten a little bit hollowed out given the M&A run that we've been on for 5 or 10 years. And there is a thirst, as we have conversations with acquirers all the time, there is a thirst for, hey, where's a $20 million broker that I can acquire? Bring me a $30 million deal. So, but there just aren't as many of those as there used to be.
Yeah, and I wonder if layered on top of that, we talked about young leadership teams. If you've just taken the reins of one of those firms in the $10 to $100 million space, looking to do a transaction is probably not on the top of your list. You've just gotten the reins. You're excited to build for the future. You've got your own plans, strategies, growth that you're focused on. And so that also may limit some of that supply. For sure. Seamless transition, because I don't want to run out of time.
The last comment I would say, it'll be very interesting as well to see if the Fed does lower borrowing costs in the near-term future? Is that going to change the calculus of our private equity-backed members? And it's worth noting that pretty much across the board, the brokerage sector was a big winner in the One Big Beautiful Bill. Certainly all of our, the corporate rates were locked in at a low rate. We achieved, along with the broader business community, the pass-through incentives are now permanent. And there's some mighty big firms. Think Lockton, think Cottingham and Butler, think Highland, that are organized as pass-throughs. It's not just mom and pops. And then the other thing that was not much noticed was that under the original TCJA in 2017, private equity was dinged so that they could only deduct EBIT as opposed to EBITDA. Well, the depreciation and amortization was added back in, so that further incentivizes private equity. So we'd heard all this discussion for 4 or 5 years that rates were going up, and that was going to equate to private equity petering out somewhat. I don't see that at all right now. So just throw that factor into it.
No, good additional point.
No, I agree with that. We had a group of investors here in Atlanta this week, Joel, and there is no lack of enthusiasm for this sector.
Yeah. The topic I was shifting us to is AI. I mean, maybe second to Howden as a theme, Joel. I mean, AI came up in every single meeting we had, which is great for Brian and I, because as you know, we're very confident and sort of looked to as experts in the field of artificial intelligence. So Brian and I had a lot to say, but it came up in every single meeting we had. And I want to throw it to Brian first, but Joel, while you're thinking about it, curious, any member conversations you had of people doing kind of tangible things in this space. But Brian, your thoughts first on just the AI conversation.
Yeah, every meeting involves some questions, commentary, thoughts, observations on AI, and AI is changing the world. And so there's a natural and logical movement to how is it going to change our industry. And for sure, brokers are diving into this. I would say from all the discussions we had at the ILF, that every broker is interested in this. Some brokers are using it in what we would call some back office areas, accounting, especially. You guys saw the press release with what Acrisure did in AI-based accounting layoffs. And then there are just a few brokers, select brokers, that are using it more broadly. In 2 years, though, when the three of us have the ILF debrief in 2027, I think this is going to be a massively different conversation. And I think that brokers will at that point have integrated artificial intelligence more deeply, and not just into back office, but into workflows, into the service side of the business, into the sales side of the business as well. And there are going to be brokers that do that via developing it in-house. And then there are going to be brokers that do it via outsourced solutions, which exist in the marketplace right now. So in 2 years, I think this is going to be a wildly different conversation. But man, there's a ton of interest.
I'm one of these old farts that if I could trade this Android in for a 1993 Blackberry, I would. I'm not your best expert on this, but I did hear a specific example from one broker about just one client that they got a dump of thousands of documents in one day, and they were able to process it and analyze it for a client meeting the very next day, and what would have otherwise taken days, if not weeks. So we all know those examples, and the technology is going to continue to make all kinds of strides. But at the end of the day, it's going to be where that human relationship and technology meet their synergy, as people still want an independent advisor. We've heard of all kinds of attempts at disruption. I remember industry reports, 15, 20 years ago saying that of the total dollar spent on insurance, that distribution is going to be squeeze. And we have seen that to a certain level. But, I've heard disintermediation bantered around for 33 years of my career. And I still think at the end of the day, clients need an advisor, and the advancements in technology are no doubt going to help brokers to focus on the consultation. I think it's probably more relevant for the insurance carriers and rates and forms. where the regulators are struggling to keep up with the implications there. But it's going to be the force, and everybody. I agree. The next 2-3 years, that's what we're going to. That conversation is still going to be dominant on how this is effectively used by our brokerage members.
Yeah, that's well said. And Joel, having worked with you when you had a BlackBerry, I will say you were like Mozart on those keys. You could crank out a 4-page lobbying brief or white paper from the back of a cab and release it to all of Congress. So I think using the BlackBerry probably benefited our industry.
I loved how you could do it underneath the table while you're staring someone in the eyes and have about a 98% success ratio.
That's right. It takes a lot of skill. 2-minute drill here. We're going to bring this home with our last topic, which I think was very interesting to us. Again, in addition to the leadership shift, is just the evolution of growth strategies. The type of growth strategies that top firms, certainly your members, are pursuing outside of sort of traditional organic growth. Cause and effect here. One could be organic growth is starting to slow down, as we've seen from our own growth and profitability survey. Q1 and Q2 were at 7.9 and 7.8% was the median growth rate. That's well below the 9s and 10s and 11s of the last few years. Our Q3 results will be wrapped up here in the next couple of weeks, so it'll be interesting to see where Q3 comes in terms of industry growth. But on the other side of that, really exciting to have conversations about really traditional firms that have just relied on organic growth, thinking about geographic expansion, thinking about building an M&A team for the first time, thinking about just diversifying revenue, doing different things outside of traditional organic growth to continue to fuel their firm, and really thinking outside of the box. I would sort of say taking shots downfield that they may never have taken 5 or 10 years ago. So curious where you both sit on that. Maybe Brian, you first, and we'll let Joel bring it home.
Yeah, sure. To me, the most interesting part of this, and you're right, people are thinking about growth in different ways, and preliminary results, early results for GPS is that it's going to be down again in Q3, maybe as much as another point from Q2. So we are at a point of a declining growth environment, not shrinking, but just growing not quite as fast as we have been, and people are taking some shots. The most interesting one to me was people thinking about using their data and their concentrations of business and client relationships to go upstream and think about more of even retail brokers thinking about more of an MGA or program approach to their business. And there was a lot of conversations about this at ILF, and I talked to an experienced industry investor yesterday who summed it up well with the thought that he said his observation was that there is a separation of underwriting talent and capital that is different than has existed before in the industry. And some of our clients, which are not generally the capital sources in the insurance value chain, are aggregating underwriting talent in order to pursue MGAs and programs. And I think that's an interesting thing, that the data and the technology enables that approach, and the combination of, if we know all of the, we sort of have the underwriting information and we have the client relationships, what can we do with that? I think that'll be interesting to watch play out.
Just real quick, I'd say, first of all, the mergers among the mega brokers in the top 20 is going to continue. I think that is going to happen. We've just been through the golden age of the E&S marketplace. It's doubled in the last 5 to 7 years. And I think it was Pat Gallagher who talked about the multiple bites of the apple years ago. And we are seeing more of that, whether it's on the MGA front, the reinsurance front, the wholesale front, E&S. And as I noted earlier, we're seeing an ever increasing percentage of our member firms that are crossing over the Atlantic to get footholds beyond the U.S. So I think that, this rush of money and capacity into the E&S markets in the last several years has resulted in some softening in the premiums. So that trend line is what you're referring to in your own indices very much tracks with what we're seeing with our own commercial market index. But for the sake of the wholesale MGA community, let's hope it doesn't soften too much.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, before you wrap it up, Webb, we haven't yet gotten to talk about my favorite takeaway of the ILF. And Joel, I don't know if you have heard this story, but if you're on Mount Rushmore, Webb may be on the way. Webb was in an elevator introducing himself to someone from a carrier whom he'd never met. And he said, "Hey, Webb Milward." And the gentleman said, "Webb Milward, wait, RedZone guy?" The Reds Webb is famous. If not visually recognizable, name recognition is starting. I think all in Joe Rogan podcast. Watch out for the Red Zone. We're climbing rapidly.
We added at least 3 to 5 new viewers after 4 days at the ILF. I was really branding this pretty hard out there.
So I was walking from the main building to one of the restaurants with Ajit Jain, who is the most enigmatic and one of the most influential people in the history of the commercial industry as head of all of Berkshire Hathaway's insurance operations. And I saw like 15 different people as I was walking with him saying, "Hey, that's Ajit Jain. That's Ajit Jain." So when Webb walks around that conference, it's the same thing.
Exactly.
I'll take it. Well, look, it's great to have you, Joel. Thank you for taking the time to join us. I know you're busy.
Hey guys, look, when I say that this meeting is about a whole lot more than just business transactions or just a trade association gathering, it is about friendships. I consider you two among the best, and I'm so deeply appreciative for you and your entire team and for the generosity that you've had for me and our council family and my personal family. I'm just grateful to have the opportunity to visit with you guys, and I always look forward to seeing you.
Well, thanks. We love seeing you.
Thankful as well.
Man, it's clear your organization continues to kind of have a finger on the pulse of what's going on at the top end of the market, and nothing better than ILF to sort of embody, that spirit of what are the key trends, what is shaping the business right now. And again, a real privilege for us to participate. So great to see you. And for our listeners, thanks for joining us again. We look forward to seeing you again in the next Red Zone. Have a